Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take some really specific source material and, well, we try to get you up to speed fast on a niche but critical topic.
And today we're going deep inside, literally. We're talking about endoscopic retrieval.
That's right, the mechanics of how you safely get something, like a foreign body or a large specimen, out of a patient. And our mission today, it's all built around some video excerpts that you, our listener, sent over. They're from Dr. G.S. Raju's YouTube channel.
Yeah, the video is called, and it is a mouthful, HCC 1472 Lucerne 12B Foreign Body Retrieval Net and Snare.
So it's pretty clear this is from a masterclass on advanced techniques.
It is. And what we want to do is really unpack the two main tools here, the retrieval net and the snare. They seem similar, but the way you use them and the risks involved are totally different.
Right, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how you get a large polyp out, or maybe a coin, or even, well, the source mentions a swallowed spoon.
Which is, a pretty awkward thing to retrieve.
To say the least. Okay, so let's start with the tools themselves. The retrieval net, how's it designed?
Well, think of a standard snare, which is basically a wire loop. Now just attach a fine mesh net inside that loop.
So it's built for containment, for catching things.
Exactly. And the handle, the part the operator actually holds, is surprisingly standard.
The so-called pistol grip.
That's the one. Your thumb goes in the ring, your forefinger and middle finger go into these two little slots on the slider.
It sounds almost too simple. You know, for something so high stakes, is it really just open your hand, close your hand?
It is, and that's the point. That simple action, opening your hand, opens the net down at the end of the scope. Closing your hand closes it.
So it's all about proportional control. The tiny movement in your hand translates directly to a tiny movement inside the patient's colon?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's critical. But there's a protocol right from the start. The source really stresses this.
What's that?
When the device is handed to the endoscopist, it absolutely has to be in the closed position, safe inside its sheath.
Ah, so you don't risk snagging it on anything before it even gets into the scope.
Exactly. You get a clean, contained device ready to go.
Okay, so the mechanics are standard, but the clinical use, that's where things get interesting. When do you actually reach for the net?
Its main job, its bread and butter, is retrieving large polyps after they've already been cut off.
Because they're too big to just suction out through the scope.
Right. If it's too big for the biopsy channel, you need the net to bag it and bring it out safely.
But it's not just for polyps?
Oh, not at all. You can use it for all sorts of foreign bodies. Think of a food bolus, a chunk of food stuck in the esophagus.
The net would be perfect for that. It wouldn't break apart.
Exactly. Or coins. A coin is heavy, it's slippery. A simple snare loop might just lose it. The net contains it.
Okay, and this is where the source got really tense. It's not about what you're grabbing, it's about how fast you do it.
Yes. The number one rule, the most critical safety detail, is that this has to be done slowly.
Which feels like a paradox. But why? Why so slow?
You have to remember the endoscopist's point of view. They're looking at this magnified, incredibly delicate tissue, the lining of the colon, the mucosa.
Okay.
They need the assistant to open the net slowly so they can position it perfectly, and they need them to close it just as slowly.
Because if it snaps shut.
If the assistant closes it too fast, the endoscopist just doesn't have the reaction time. We're talking milliseconds to make sure they've only caught the polyp and not the colon wall itself.
And what happens if they get it wrong? If the net closes too fast and they pull?
The source is very direct about this. You can rip the lining of the colon.
Wow. Just like that?
Just like that. It's a catastrophic complication. So
Wow.
that slow, deliberate pace is everything. It's the main safety feature.
That's an incredible amount of pressure on the communication between the two operators.
It really is.
Hmm.
And that rule about being slow connects to another big hazard.
What's that?
Metal clips. Sometimes, after cutting off a big polyp, the doctor will place these tiny metal clips to prevent bleeding.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
Right. If you open that net too fast near one of those clips, it can easily snag on the metal.
And then you're stuck.
Then you are really stuck.
Hmm.
The source calls it, and I quote, a mess. And a mess in this context means you might have to abandon the device, pull the whole scope out, and start over. It turns a simple retrieval into a major problem.
Okay, so extreme care with the net. Let's switch gears to the snare. It can also grab polyps, but it seems to have a different set of risks.
It does. The biggest issue with a snare for polyp retrieval is just losing the specimen.
It just slips out of the loop.
It can, especially if you're pulling it through a difficult part of the colon.
Yeah.
The source mentions the sigmoid colon, for example, which can be really twisty and narrow.
Right, trying to drag a slippery bit of tissue through an obstacle course.
Exactly. The risk of it just popping out of the loop is pretty high. So if you're retrieving a polyp from deep inside, say, the right colon, a net just makes more sense. You need that security.
But there are exceptions. You can use a snare sometimes.
You can. And it often comes down to practicality. If the polyp is right there in the rectum, for instance,
Easy to reach. A short trip out.
a very short, straight path. The source says if the operator wants to not waste money on a net, they can just use a snare to pull it out. The risk of losing it is minimal.
It's a fascinating balance of risk versus resources. But the snare has a specialty, right? A place where it's actually better than the net.
It does. It excels with long, rigid objects, things where the bulkiness of a net would actually get in the way.
And this brings us to the teaspoon.
This brings us to the teaspoon. A patient actually swallowed a teaspoon, and a snare is the tool for that job.
How on earth do you grab a spoon with a wire loop?
With extreme precision. You can't just throw the loop over it. You have to carefully maneuver the scope to get the snare around a specific point, maybe the handle or the narrow part.
And then you have to pull it out through some very narrow anatomy.
Right. The whole goal is to get the object aligned perfectly with the GA junction.
The gastroesophageal junction.
Yeah.
The narrow spot between the stomach and the esophagus.
That's the bottleneck. If you can get the spoon lined up straight, you can pull it through. A bulky net might obscure your view or not even fit. The simple, elegant loop of the snare is actually more precise for that specific task.
That makes perfect sense. The net is for containment. The snare is for precision grasping.
That's the core distinction.
Okay, let's just quickly recap the big takeaways here. Both tools, the net and the snare, they use the same super simple open hand, close hand mechanic.
Right. The handle is standardized for that fine motor control, but what you do with them is completely different.
The net is your go-to for bulky things. Large polyps, food, coins. It's safer in tricky anatomy, but you have to remember the golden rule.
Slowly, slowly. That's the only safe speed.
And the snare, that's your specialist. It's for long objects like that teaspoon, as long as you can get the alignment right. Or it's for an easy polyp in the rectum when you're trying to be economical.
I think that's a perfect summary. One is about containing a mouse to manage the risk of losing it, and the other sacrifices containment for this very specific grasping ability.
It's just amazing how much strategy and risk assessment goes into choosing between two seemingly similar tools. Thank you for walking us through this using Dr. Raju's material. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure. And, it brings up a final thought. Based on everything we've talked about, ripping the colon lining, snagging clips.
The high stakes of it all.
Exactly. The most important skill here isn't strength or even how fancy the scope is. It's deliberate, controlled speed, and perfect communication.
Slow and steady wins the race, even in high-tech medicine.
Well, it raises the question, doesn't it? When you're dealing with delicate human tissue, where 1 millimeter of error can be a disaster, how often is slow and steady not just the safest way, but actually the most technologically advanced approach you have?
The idea that human control, that deliberate patience, is the most critical piece of technology in the room.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the hardware is only as good as the hands and the minds controlling it.
That is a great thought to leave with our listeners. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. Keep digging.